Anyway, this is the 831, the school service, going from Kidderminster pub across Ringway to Wolverley High School Church of St. Enjoy the video.
Before it became one, called me believing in sort of nonsense.
The Bursts are back. Starts tomorrow at 8:30 on BBC One and iPlayer.
The early evening news now here on BBC One with Michelle Hussein. A warning that the government will get tougher if people don't keep to the latest coronavirus restrictions. Ministers and officials have been weighing up whether further measures are required as thousands more cases are recorded.
We, of course, have to be prepared to take action if that's what's necessary.
I don't think a lockdown is inevitable, but I think it's now more likely because of the near collapse of testing.
We'll look at why the government believes we are at a tipping point in the pandemic. Also this evening, leaked documents reveal how some UK banks have allowed criminals and money launderers to move billions of pounds around the world. And Spitfires and a hurricane over London as the Battle of Britain is remembered 80 years on. The Health Secretary Matt Hancock says further national lockdowns cannot be ruled out if people fail to follow the rules on tackling the coronavirus. Fines of up to £10,000 have been announced for those who don't self-isolate if they test positive, or those who are told they've been identified as a close contact of a positive case. Labour has said the government's test and trace system is near collapse. Our political correspondent Ian Watson reports.
When it comes to complying with rules and restrictions, the government says we're more lax than some of our continental counterparts. So as coronavirus cases increase, expect to hear tougher messages on enforcement. The Health Secretary says we're at tipping point.
If everybody follows the rules, then we can avoid further national lockdowns, but we of course have to be prepared to take action if that's what's necessary.
So we might be facing a further national lockdown if we fail to.
That's exactly right. I don't rule it out. I don't want to see it.
In just over a week from now in England, if you don't self-isolate when you should, you could face an initial fine of £1,000 and up to £10,000. The Health Secretary says we should tell the police if we see rule breakers, but in London, not everyone will take that advice.
That whole thing of telling on your neighbour, I think breaking up community is the last thing that should be encouraged.
If there's a hefty fine in place or something like that, people would maybe throw the money around.
This weekend, the Prime Minister's under pressure from medical and scientific advisors to take stronger, swifter action to slow the spread of the virus. The Prime Minister's been in top-level meetings to discuss his options, but he's also under pressure from his next-door neighbour, the Chancellor, who doesn't want to see fragile economic recovery killed off. So it is likely that we'll see new temporary measures across England, but that these will also fall far short of a full national lockdown. While schools and workplaces are likely to remain open, some of the restrictions imposed in local lockdowns seem set to spread across England. At the 212 Cafe and Bar in Leeds, there's no enthusiasm for a possible curfew.
Put a 10 o'clock curfew, most bars probably will decide not to open back up because trade won't be worth it for the late night venues. But also it could work in a different way where all the students, all the people go out through the day. The bars take the same amount of money, but obviously it'll just cause trouble through the day rather than the night.
Labour say they'll support whatever new steps the government takes, but
If I was the Prime Minister, I would apologise for the fact that we're in this situation with testing. Throughout the summer, we were saying, prepare for the autumn. Instead, we'd had the exams fiasco. I would make fixing testing the #1 priority and reinstate the daily press conferences so we all know what's going on.
The Prime Minister will upset some of his own MPs if he introduces further restrictions. He's looking at a range of options, but doing nothing doesn't seem to be one of them. In Watson, BBC News.
Well, the latest government figures show the daily number of new infections remains high. 3,899 cases were recorded for the previous 24 hours. That means that the average number of new cases per day in the last week was 3,679. The daily hospital numbers have also risen. 233 people were admitted on September the 18th. This figure does not include Scotland. There were 18 deaths of people who'd had a positive COVID-19 test in the previous 28 days. On average, in the last week, there were 21 such deaths per day. And that takes the total number across the UK to 41,777. Well, ministers are closely watching COVID cases elsewhere in Europe and the measures taken in other countries. Our health correspondent Catherine Burns explains.
Before this year, pictures like this mostly belonged to science fiction films, not the news. But over the springtime, we got used to seeing health workers wearing protective equipment to care for coronavirus patients in intensive care. This footage, though, is from a few days ago in France. In Spain, this neighbourhood of Madrid and many others will go back into lockdown tomorrow.
People are concerned. I think there is an awareness or a realization that we relaxed too much, as many other countries did.
The question is, how do we compare to other countries across Europe? Well, over the last 4